I'm so pleased to introduce you to Barbara Washington Franklin. She has a very important story to tell here on Author's Corner. And boy, she has seen and done it all when it comes to being a litigator, and as a lawyer. And then what she went through, the ringer on the other side. And that's the name of her book, The Odyssey of Judicial Corruption. Ooh, even saying that, the hair on my arms goes straight up because I think some of you are just gonna not believe some of the shock and awe of all of this. So, Barbara, thanks for coming on. I think your book is super, super important
Thank you.
and a warning for a lot of people. So, let's talk about your story and why you wrote the book.
Actually, my story is, well, first of all, let me just say, Kate, that thank you for having me on your show. And I wrote the book because I thought about what my goal was, basically, bottom line. And it's really to encourage and inspire others to stand up to authority. I want to educate. I try to educate the public as to what really goes on in the courtroom, what really goes on in a court system, and then be empowered by my story and inspired by my story and share their stories and stand up to power and to authority. As a matter of fact, I think as Americans, that's a part of our responsibility as citizens, actually.
Absolutely, you said it much better than me. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said
That
your story is so important. So, tell us what happened to you.
what happened back in, I've been a trial litigator forever. And this was back in the 90s, 1995, 96. A young woman came into my office. She was about 31, 32 years old and told this harrowing story of how she had been molested and raped at the age of 11 by a neighborhood vendor. She had worked on his truck after school and on summers to make money, help out her family. And then one day he pretends he's taking them going to a warehouse to get, all kinds of goods. And it turns out, he used it to rape her there. And it just so happened that she was 11 when this happened. But now she's in my office. She's about 32. And she said she was watching television one evening, watching the news, and she couldn't believe her eyes. This same alleged pedophile was on television and he had won the $90 million lottery jackpot, DC jackpot, sharing it with one other person. So that means he won $45 million. And of course, now she comes to me after going to all these other attorneys that turned her down because she didn't have any money. She was estranged from her family and basically was homeless at the time she came to my office. She was living with a friend. And so now she wants justice, of course. She wants, because she's suffering with PTSD and all these other ailments. And I thought about it and thought about it. And actually, the first meeting, I had to decline to take her case because she was in there was so much rage coming from her I had never seen before. I was really frightened by it. And I didn't know if I could handle the case, to be honest with you. And so I graciously declined. I said I would not be able to work with her because of the level of anger and rage she expressed in my office. So then a year later, she calls my office. She makes another appointment. She comes in. And of course, this time she sits and she's calmer. She's not wearing sunglasses. And I just was very moved by her story. And I really believed that I could represent her and then be successful in getting her some kind of, the compensation that she deserved. And so that's what I did. I took her case on a contingency fee basis. I'm a solo practitioner. So, I mean, I'm on my own. I took her case, and then after we tried to settle with this alleged pedophile, this gentleman and his family, they refused, their attorneys refused. And then he thereafter passed. His wife became the executrix of his estate, and she moved to Florida. So now the case, now the family, the estate is in Florida. I filed a suit in Florida, Broward County Circuit Court. I was admitted to the court to represent her. This was in May of 1996, the last day of the statute of limitations. And she started getting threats. We had to hire round the clock security, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, about 3 or 4 weeks after I filed suit in Florida, The FBI agent in charge of the Miami-Dade office contacted me through my client and said, "You need to advise your lawyer that we've checked her background. We can't find any derogatory information that we can use to blackmail her. So we're going to go after her husband if she doesn't get out of the case." And of course, that was because they already knew this case was going to settle. And I would then lose all of my attorney fees, which was like 40% of whatever the settlement. And I talked to my husband about it. He said, "No, this is your work. You haven't done anything wrong. You can't bend to these people." My husband, by the way, at the time, was director of DC Public Library, and he was also a past president of the American Library Association, ALA. And we had never experienced anything like this. Lo and behold, fast forward, it's now fall. We started getting rumors that my husband was under investigation. And I said, "Oh, this is real." And lo and behold, in December, my client came to me and said she had settled the case without any knowledge or any involvement on my part, never said a word to me, that she had settled her case for $34 million. This was December of 1996. By January, February, it was all over the news that my husband was under investigation. Long story short, he was charged with a conflict of interest felony. He wound up having to serve house arrest, supervised probation, so forth and so on, all because I didn't get out of the case. And so rather than jeopardize my husband possibly being incarcerated because of me and my case, I just did a hands off, because these authorities had shown me how serious they were in the fact that I was not going to get paid. And if I pursued this matter, my husband would suffer. And so I let it go. My husband passed in 2004. And I then wrote my first book in 2008. But there was something in me, Kate, that I just couldn't live with myself because of the unfairness and the injustice. And so in 2009, I sued my client for a breach of the contract. And in 2009, right after we appeared before the judge, we settled the case in one day. The judge said, "I want this settled." We settled the case. My client never denied having bank statements and so forth and so on. Then the judge retired. Once the judge retired, this was in December, the case is then transferred to a new judge. And when I walked into this judge's courtroom, I said, "It's over." All of my intuition, I knew that I was in the wrong courtroom. And as it turned out, this judge, along with other judges, got together and literally changed the facts of my case. In one instance, the March 18th, 2011 hearing, the former chief judge literally shook my client down in the hallway outside of the courtroom. I mean, it's all in the book because no one would believe. And because of so much of my story is so incredible, Kate, I actually use the bulk of the book is in a transcript format, court transcript format, and I make commentary and I make analysis to give the reader, a complete comfort and understanding that this happened. This is what happened in the courtroom. This is what went on, and no one can challenge it. No one can challenge me in terms of my veracity or being truthful about it, because they're reading what happened and it's all there. But you see, in DC, we don't have cameras in the courtroom. I'm hoping that as a result of my book, one of the things that will result will be that the authorities will see that we need cameras in the courtroom. And by the way, what happened to me goes on all the time. It's just that people don't know how to respond because judges are the untouchables. But I'm here to tell you that the only difference between you and me and our listeners and others, between us and a judge, is that he or she wears a black robe. That's it. They're human beings. Some are good, some are not so good. And anytime you have a multi-million-dollar case, as I had, it's up for grabs. It's up for grabs. And they'll take their chance on changing facts, shaking down. When I say my client was shaking down in the hallway, the judge had us go out. I knew instantly it was a bogus recess. All of a sudden, we're in the midst of trial, of the hearing, rather. And the judge says, "Oh, I want you to go out and try to settle this case in 15 minutes and then come back in." And I just said, "What is this? This is not right. Something's not wrong here." We went out into the hallway, and within minutes, here comes the former chief judge, who's now a semi-retired judge. And he obviously was involved. And he comes down the hallway, stands right in front of my client, and just stared at her, threatening stares. I said, "Hi, Your Honor," never even acknowledged me, as if this is in the courthouse, outside of the courtroom. And you might say, "Well, Barbara, what did you say?" When we returned to the courtroom, I was traumatized. My client was traumatized. And all I could say, and I know this came from just angels protecting me. I said, "Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a continuance until I can decide how to proceed from this point on," because that's all I knew to say. And the judge remarks, "Oh, well, I'll give you your continuance. And then when you figure it out, let me know." So he was actually saying, you see what's going on here, right? There's nothing you can do about it because they're all in it together.